Washington State spring bear hunting season versus public school funding. You never would have thought those two somehow intersect, but they do. If you go back in the history of this state, for over 100 years, black bear predation upon timber has been a problem. Books have been written about it. We talked about that in the past. You can go back to a lot of these old resource books and you can find that it's been documented, it's been talked about it, it's been studied. There's been a lot studied about it. So the three books that we had talked about was Black Bear of Washington by the Washington State Game Department, Education of a Bear Hunter by Ralph Flowers, and Born Under a Stump, The Life and Times of Big Bill Hewlett. So there's a historical precedent of black bears, predation on timber, and the various different reasons why in this state that needs to be addressed and has historically been addressed. So within the last 2 years, the Washington State Supreme Court has reaffirmed that the Washington State Department of Natural Resources has the management of the state trust forest lands. Well, gee, Brad, where's that going? It's going here. Go to the Washington Department of Natural Resources website. There's going to be links down below so you can get this information, so you can read it yourself right off the webpage. So it's not just me, some old dude, telling you a story about, black bears and public school funding. But here it is, right off the Washington Department of Natural Resources webpage. You'll go to the page called Timber Sales, and it will say this, quote, trust land, timber, and other forest products help generate revenue for designated beneficiaries, including public K-12 schools, universities, and other state facilities, and also help fund local services in many counties. So when you think about that, okay, you got black bear predation on timber. You have Department of Natural Resources is the manager for state trust land, and the sale of state trust land timber funds our public schools, our universities, and many of the entities in the state of Washington. Then you take a look at Washington State is running at a horrible financial deficit, and schools are always looking for funding. And so you got this crossroad here. The primary source of funding for schools is timber sales on public land, and black bears prey upon it. There was a petition submitted to the Washington State Department of Fish and Wildlife in 2023 that went into a lot of detail about this. And I'm going to link that down below in the video description so you can take a look at that. And that would have been in 2020. That might actually have been December of 2022. Nonetheless, I'll put a link down below to the petition so you can go ahead and take a look at it. But anyway, this was all laid out in front of the commission, and that's important to keep in mind. Now, the Department of Fish and Wildlife had also that's where I got the December of 2022. In November of 2022 and December of 2022, the Department of Fish and Wildlife responded to a bunch of questions to the commission that they had asked prior to canceling the Washington State spring bear hunting season. And in this document, and I'll put a link to it down below so you can actually read the response from the Washington State Department of Fish and Wildlife staff to the commission. And basically this thing read, it was on page 12, and it read, the spring black bear special permits hunts are only one tool and are not intended to solely mitigate bear-caused timber damage. The spring black bear special permits allow recreational hunting opportunity in areas where timber damage is occurring. The intent is to have human presence on the landscape, remove a few bears using recreational harvest, and thereby have some level of mitigation of damage. We have not assessed how effective these recreational hunts are in reducing tree damage. The benefit of this hunt to the landowner is not a direct cause and effect assessment, and often having a hunt open in these areas is enough to mitigate the damage, even if it does not actually reduce the damage. Note that the harvest level that results from these hunts are not substantial and do not harm the overall bear population. Unquote. Now, when you think about that, okay, the commission was told, yeah, bear timber damage. Yes, bears only damage timber in the spring. Yes, we have a historical hunt that has been successful for decades and decades and decades and decades. This hunt does not have a negative impact on overall bear populations, and yet the Washington State Department of Fish and Wildlife Commission, the voting majority of that commission voted to cancel the Washington State spring black bear hunt. And you have to wonder, well, why? Why would they do such a thing? Why would they do such a thing? It's a problem. And now we hear the commission giving instruction to the department staff that, we already talked about that. We don't want to talk about that again. If you can imagine some new management need for black bears in the spring, and you can do a study, and you can bring us a bunch of science, and we can talk about it, and you can show us what the results of having a spring bear hunt again, but it's got to be a different kind of management need, we might consider it. If protecting the source of public school funding for the state of Washington is not a sufficient management need, you can draw your own conclusions, but to me, that's a pretty big management need. And, the staff was real clear. Doesn't have a significantly negative impact on overall black bear populations. We just listened to the department staff giving instruction to the commission over the last 3 months with the results of the new latest statewide black bear survey, which had taken 5 years to complete. There's more bears now than there were in 2022. But more importantly, the staff describes it as black bear populations are robust and thriving. Well, you got a robust and thriving black bear population. That would then imply that you're going to have even more black bear predation on public land timber, which is the primary source of funding for public schools. And keep in mind, last year, over 2023, over the 12 months there, the commission went to great work, and they approved it's a long name, Black Bear Timber Damage Depredation Permits Program. So they wrote the new law for that, and that is still in place. That only protects commercial timber producers, right? So the commission has set this precedent that they believe it is important enough to protect commercial timber from black bear predation in the spring, but the commission has voted twice now that they are against protecting public timber from black bear predation in the spring. And we read it right here. Go to the DNR website, go to the page Timber Sales. The sale of public land timber provides funding for Washington's public schools, universities, and other state agencies. So that is where the rubber hits the road. The spring black bear season adds protection to public land timber, which is the funding source for Washington State's public schools. So if you care about schools, if you care about where we're going to get the money for those schools, look to your Washington State Department of Fish and Wildlife Commission and ask them why they stopped a spring black bear hunt in the state of Washington that for decades and decades and decades and decades had been successfully in place to provide mitigation and protection to public land timber. This commission only wants to protect, the majority on this commission only want to protect commercial timber producers. And they've turned their back on public land timber, which is the funding source for Washington State's public schools. Hey, thanks so much for watching this video. And remember, bears are wild animals. They are not furry forest pets. They're not furry friends from the forest. They're not. They're wild animals. They're predators. And as I always tell people, stay safe out there.